All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. Think of us as your personal medical field guide to the unseen and honestly kind of terrifying world of infectious diseases. Whether you're studying medicine or you're just fascinated by the microscopic battles happening inside us literally every single day, understanding how we classify and fight these pathogens, it's absolutely critical. So, here's our quick syllabus for today. We'll start with the Dallas lesson, then move on to classifying threats, emerging pathogens, antibiotic resistance, reappearing diseases, and we'll wrap it all up with a rapid-fire clinical study guide. Let's get to it.
Section 1. The Dallas lesson. Every patient is unknown. You know, this is a pretty stark reality in the modern medical world, but it's a mindset that's completely fundamental to healthcare and infection control.
To understand why this mindset is so vital, we've got to look back to September 2014. A Dallas emergency room nurse treated a patient who had recently returned from West Africa. And despite being in a highly advanced modern facility, that nurse became the very first person to contract Ebola right inside the United States. A second nurse also fell ill shortly after. Let me tell you, it was a massive, system-wide wake-up call regarding highly contagious infections.
And you can see the immediate aftermath right here. Healthcare workers had to undergo rigorous CDC training. Actually, the Dallas nurse ended up suing the hospital for failing to develop policies and adequately train their personnel. The big takeaway here, without the absolute correct use of personal protective equipment, PPE, transmission is simply non-negotiable. The virus just doesn't care.
Moving on to Section 2, classifying threats into 3 disease categories. Because to defend against these microscopic invaders, we first have to understand how to categorize them, right? I mean, you can't fight what you haven't defined.
So as you can see here, we can clearly separate our threats into 3 distinct buckets. First, we've got emerging threats. These are the new or mutating viruses that often jump from animals to humans. Think Ebola, Zika, dengue. Second, there are recurring threats. These are the ongoing, often entirely preventable issues like healthcare-associated infections or that awful foodborne norovirus. And third, we have reappearing threats. These are basically ghosts of the past, things like measles and pertussis, which were previously controlled but are now making a dangerous comeback.
Section 3. Emerging pathogens, new and mutating viruses. Let's see how this specific category really builds our understanding of the most terrifying threats out there.
A prime example of an emerging threat is the filovirus. This family of RNA viruses acts like a ruthless biological machine. They replicate incredibly quickly within host cells, completely destroying them, taking hold in multiple organs, and causing severe, rapid tissue death and hemorrhagic fevers. It's intense.
Just look at this 25,000 times magnification of Ebola virus particles budding from a host cell. Those green filamentous structures, that is the virus itself. It's honestly a mesmerizing yet incredibly deadly evolutionary adaptation. It allows the virus to spread rapidly through a patient's blood, eventually leading to systemic shock. So the crucial point here is recognizing the sheer diversity of these enemies, particularly when we contrast our threat categories. On the left, notice the sand-like surface of Lassa. That's an emerging arenavirus transmitted by rodents. But on the right, you've got the dense geometric armor of norovirus, which is a recurring gastrointestinal virus. This side-by-side shot perfectly captures the difference between an unpredictable, mutating animal-borne threat and a highly contagious, ongoing human-to-human operational challenge.
All right, Section 4. Antibiotic resistance, a human-made crisis. Because while exotic emerging viruses grab all the flashy headlines, our daily recurring threat is actually unfolding right in our own hospitals and farms. I'm talking about antibiotic resistance. And listen, this doesn't just happen by accident. It's actively driven by 2 main factors. First, inappropriate prescribing in healthcare. That means giving the wrong type, the wrong dose, or just handing out antibiotics when they simply aren't necessary. Second, there's widespread agricultural use. Low doses are routinely given to food animals just to enhance their growth, which is basically paving a superhighway for resistant bacteria to develop.
This whole process unfolds in a very predictable chain reaction. First, the antibiotics wipe out both the bad bacteria and your body's healthy bacteria. Next, your disrupted microbiome loses its natural defense capabilities. Then, those opportunistic drug-resistant bacteria step right into that void, taking over and multiplying like crazy. And finally, these resilient superbugs are transmitted to other people.
As you can see here, treating an infection improperly is literally like a wildfire destroying a forest. It burns away your healthy microbiome, leaving the entire ecosystem of your gut completely defenseless against deadly, recurring germs like C. diff, which, by the way, can cause severe, life-threatening diarrhea.
And the terrifying result of this chain reaction is quantified right here by urgent CDC data. Threats like carbapenem-resistant Enterobacterales and C. diff alone are responsible for over 12,000 preventable deaths annually. Let that sink in. These are everyday, recurring infections that are becoming incredibly difficult and sometimes impossible to treat.
Which brings us to Section 5, Reappearing Diseases and the Return of Past Threats. Because beyond the newly emerging and the constantly recurring, we also have to confront the threats we thought we had already defeated. For example, infants are once again suffering from pertussis or whooping cough, which causes severe inflammation of the respiratory tract. Why? Well, thanks to widespread misinformation campaigns that erode critical public trust in national vaccination programs, we are seeing the return of these agonizing and entirely preventable diseases. With vaccines readily available, these infections simply should not be occurring in this day and age.
Okay, let's wrap this up with Section 6, our clinical study guide. I'm going to lock in everything we've covered today with a rapid-fire review. If you really want to understand infectious diseases, these are 4 terms you absolutely must know.
First up is arthralgia. This translates to severe, debilitating joint pain. It's a hallmark clinical sign of dengue, an emerging mosquito-borne virus. In fact, that severe pain is exactly why dengue earned the terrible nickname, break bone fever.
Next is viremia. This simply means the presence of a virus actively circulating within your bloodstream. It is a critical window of time for transmissibility. For instance, in dengue patients, viremia can persist for anywhere from 2 to 12 whole days.
Third is leukopenia. This is a condition commonly seen in severe viral infections, like hemorrhagic fevers, where your body's primary cellular defenders, your white blood cells, are significantly depleted. It leaves you highly vulnerable.
And finally, virions. These are the actual individual infectious viral offspring. When a virus, like Ebola, invades a host cell, it basically turns that cell into a hijacked factory, eventually bursting it open to release massive numbers of infectious virions to aggressively spread the disease further.
So you now possess the vocabulary and the structural understanding of these pathogens, from unpredictable emerging viruses all the way to the human-driven spread of antibiotic-resistant recurring superbugs. So my final, somewhat provocative question to you is this. Armed with this knowledge, how will you advocate for better practices? And what steps will you take to ensure you aren't the weak link in the chain of infection? Keep exploring, stay curious, and we'll catch you next time.